I am the keeper of an untold story. The story of a volunteer group who scored a victory against the Chinese Communist Party. Whether or not you believe I'm delusional for thinking Citizens Against Communist Chinese propaganda closed the Florida Splendid China theme park is of no consequence. The contributions from people and organizations deserve to be acknowledged, and as the coordinator, it falls on me. I apologize for taking so long. I should have ignored the threats and provided hope. A complete telling of this story would take hours. Please do not allow the brevity of this presentation to diminish the accomplishments of the participants. First, why was there opposition to the Florida Splendid China theme park? Florida Splendid China was owned and operated by China Travel Services Hong Kong, whose senior management are selected by the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. The State Council is the highest organ of state power in the Chinese Communist Party-controlled People's Republic of China. Secret documents obtained and translated from a 1993 propaganda conference specifically addressed the use of cultural exchanges to spread Chinese government propaganda. The St. Petersburg Times newspaper, in an article covering the opening of Florida Splendid China, stated their management were hoping to bring in children by the busload. Opposition to the theme park focused on the following exhibits: Tibet's Potala Palace, the so-called Mausoleum of Genghis Khan, the Idgah Mosque, and the Tomb of Apakoja, misnamed Shang Fei's tomb. The inclusion of the Potala Palace, home to successive Dalai Lamas since 1645, implied it was Chinese and Tibetans were Chinese. The irony is the People's Liberation Army bombarded the structure in 1959 during the Tibetan uprising. The Potala Palace no longer fulfills the same role as the center of Tibetan cultural, religious, and political life, as the Chinese government turned it into a museum. The inclusion of an exhibit called the Mausoleum of Genghis Khan is another example of how the Chinese government attempted to distort history. The memory of the great Khan was kept alive for nearly 700 years with the nomadic three ordens of Genghis Khan, a mobile shrine dedicated to his memory, since nobody knows the location of his grave. Under Chinese communist rule, the three ordens were confiscated and a structure built to house and control the relics. This structure is called the Mausoleum of Genghis Khan and was used as a pigpen during the Cultural Revolution. Genghis Khan was never Chinese, although his descendants ruled over them. The Idgah Mosque, a centerpiece of the ancient Silk Road city of Kashgar, is used as a tourist attraction and maintained under the control of a committee of avowed atheists. Building started on the tomb of Apakoja in 1640 and is the resting place for him and 72 of his relatives, including Ibrahim. The Uyghur believe she committed suicide rather than become the Chinese emperor's concubine. The theme park's version erases her great struggle and replaces it with a false history. Calling the structure the Tomb of Shang Fei or the Tomb of the Fragrant Concubine is an attempt to rewrite history. Citizens Against Communist Chinese propaganda also opposed the inclusion of religious exhibits in the theme park. Their inclusion in the theme park implies the government of China allows the free expression of religion when all religious activity in the PRC is under the control of avowed atheists, the Chinese Communist Party. To help explain what Citizens Against Communist Chinese propaganda was not against, None of the other exhibits were a target of our activities. Our web pages provided entries for each of the exhibits and solicited further information from the public. This was not an anti-China effort. Many organizations called on the theme park management to remove these exhibits. Citizens Against Communist Chinese Propaganda wrote letters to the theme park management to discuss the signage in front of the exhibits, and we'd stop our activities. A letter was sent prior to each demonstration organized by CACCP and never answered. Second, what was done in opposition to the Florida Splendid China theme park? Protest demonstrations started outside the main gate of the attraction on grand opening day in December 1993 and continued at an average of every 2 or so months. When the price dropped for an annual ticket to just above the price for a daily admission, demonstrators entered the theme park. Statements were read in front of the exhibits and videotaped. However, there were no video streaming services to get the word out like today. There was local media coverage, and a segment on the nightly TV news was devoted to our demonstration when Toksta Rinpoche, elder brother of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, attended.
China always tell lie to the world,
Letters were written to all 69 Florida public school boards relating our objections to public school field trips and the indoctrination of our children in Chinese Communist Party propaganda. Our short-lived snail mail newsletter converted to the internet and morphed into a number of mailing lists, a running history of the efforts against the theme park, and information on the struggle against the falsification of Tibetan, Mongolian, and Uyghur histories. Citizens Against Communist Chinese Propaganda also held conferences with international attendees and colluded with activists in Netherlands to stop the Sweet Lake China theme park scheduled for an opening in 2002. I'm reticent to name names of our supporting individuals. To protect their anonymity and forego any possible negative consequences resulting from a change of situation, I believe it to be the most prudent course of action. The list includes Tibetans, Mongolians, Uyghur, Taiwanese, Japanese, Chinese, Americans, Europeans, and many others. To actually list all the names would take longer than this video, and invariably, some will be forgotten. Among the organizations supporting Citizens Against Communist Chinese Propaganda in the effort against the propaganda theme park were the Office of Tibet, New York, the Inner Mongolian People's Party, Uyghur American Association, International Campaign for Tibet, Eastern Turkestan National Congress, Formosans for Human Rights, International Tibet Independence Movement, and members of Kushiganduk. As a consequence of our efforts, Florida Splendid China closed its gates at the end of 2003. Although the media proclaimed it was the economic downturn after 9/11, the real reason was the united effort convincing Florida citizens and visitors the truth about Florida Splendid China. In April 2004, I authored an op-ed in Insight magazine to defend my position, and later that month, the Houston consulate of the People's Republic of China called my home. The thinly veiled threats against family members were communicated to U.S. authorities, and I ceased all political activities for a while. Future videos will discuss certain aspects in greater detail. Thanks for listening.